We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, Leaha Mattinson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm host Leaha Mattinson. I want to first of all say thank you to everybody in the world who's showing up and sharing this podcast with your friends and family. We're now up to over 260,000 downloads a month, and that's because of all of your awesome listening and sharing. So before we get rolling on today's episode, I want you to give yourself a pat on the back for doing a great job. And if you are listening to this on a podcast, that's awesome. If you want to watch it, then please come to the masteryourlife.ca website so you can see myself and my wonderful guest this week, Dr. David Hardy. Dr. Dave, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Nice to be here again.
Nice to have you. So Dr. Dave is here from the Collegiate Sports Centre in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada. Now, for those of you who follow the podcast on UK Health Radio, you'll know that Canada has been going through quite a bit of shenanigans. And it's not just the snow in Canada that's creating health problems for people. So I just want to invite you again to come to the website if you're looking for some deeper information about ways to be well for chronic or mysterious illnesses. That's where you can find that kind of intel. For today's episode, Dr. David Hardy and I are going to dive into his specialty, which is neurodevelopmental disorders. And we're going to also maybe highlight a little bit ADHD. And I know a lot of parents and grandparents are going to want to take notes on how to deal with ADHD. And from your perspective, Dr. Dave, maybe you could just tell the audience what your background is and what is ADHD, because I think it's like a range of things that people kind of label and don't really know what they're talking about. So thanks for your expertise in advance. What is it?
My previous career was in education, and I taught in Australia, Japan, and here in Red Deer, Canada. And I had the pleasure of teaching basically coded behavioral students. And with that, there was always quite commonly the diagnosis of ADHD. So a lot of attention issues, and in some cases, a lot of hyperactivity. And what you're looking at is basically some circuits in the brain just not developing properly. And usually with ADHD, you're also looking at kind of the right brain not working as well as the left as well. And then, of course, more so kind of in the frontal areas. So a lot of inhibition control issues.
And so what kinds of things, what kind of age group of children were you working with, and what kind of trouble were they getting into? Because coded is a nice word to say they were troublemakers. And, you know, what is the behaviors that people would be doing, and what were the ages of the kids that you were seeing?
I had middle school, so you're looking at kind of your preteen and early teenagers. So of course that's a hard time for anyone to go through. Mm-hmm. So they're discovering themselves, they're discovering their voices as well, and a lot of acting out, I guess, and basically interrupting when they shouldn't, and a lot of mood swings, and just not being able to sit and do their work. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the school system set up to be at a desk for too long, and that type of learning environment doesn't work well for these children. And just being able to concentrate and to learn is a challenge for them. And then, of course, that's going to lead to frustration, and frustration leads to behavioral issues. And it just becomes this downward spiral as well. And we can sit there all day long and blame the kid for not not wanting to learn or not wanting to behave. But there's an underlying issue there that's not getting taken care of. And it's really amazing that there's a lot more techniques and ways to deal with these issues that are starting to be developed, and a lot of kind of old techniques that once again we've kind of talked about before, that a lot of movement therapies really work well, because the way the brain develops is through sensory stimulation and through movement. So that becomes the major target to get these kids better, and everybody having a better time versus that frustration
and lack of success. Yes, sadness, all the psychiatric stuff that comes along with it. So in 1991, I speak to this because I was the counselor for a school division that was, had one child diagnosed with ADHD and then went in 2 years to 80. And so that's a while ago. And but what I want to ask you from your professional perspective, Dave, is there an actual uptick in ADHD, or has the way that it gets diagnosed become different?
I think both.
Okay, both.
There's more awareness to get people diagnosed. And then, of course, a lot of parents are going to want their kids, if they're struggling to be diagnosed with a condition. So hopefully they get more help, or it maybe justifies the learning issues. Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of both, absolutely. And of course, the way we're raising children and all the toxins and bad food, inflammation is going to cause just not good development, and that leads to these issues later on.
Another thing I just want to again ask your perspective on is, because you were seeing these children in middle school, was there a miss of the diagnosis or of the behavior in elementary school? Or was it that the behavior started showing up in junior high school, in middle school?
With the children I was teaching, they were diagnosed pretty early, most of them. But for quite a few, you're absolutely right. It doesn't really get noticed until there's issues and problems that cause disruption in a classroom. And of course, boys are going to be more affected than girls because boys act out more. And then too, when you get the label of attention issues and having hyperactivity, that's quite commonly more, once again, kind of the tendencies boys have as well. So I think there's a lot of girls out there that do have learning challenges and issues that probably aren't getting diagnosed or getting help that they need, because once again, they're less likely to act out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So with these children that are in junior high, is it a different strategy for helping them to cope or to treat the attention problem? Or do the teachers need treatment? Just kidding. Or is it a dual approach? Because sometimes what I would find in my professional career is that often teachers would like to say that kids had attention issues, and so did parents, because they really weren't that interested in teaching and parenting. So we're talking about the teachers who are good teachers and the parents who actually are being conscientious about raising their children, that are trying to master what's going on. And sometimes these attention issues are like a moving target. So when you see them, children when they're little, the presentation's different because they're trying to figure out how to, as they get older, not be punished so much. So it's like, I don't want to be punished. So I got to try to figure out how I'm going to behave differently. But maybe do you think boys care less about punishment? Or I know it's like we're waxing the philosophical here a bit. It bears consideration, right? It's like avoiding, who's avoiding the trouble, but still just suppressing behavior and then not successful in whatever they're trying to achieve in school.
I think you just hit on it, that there is a difference and a gray area between behavior and actual physical things that aren't developing properly in the brain. And if it was strictly just behavior, then yeah, punishment and rewards should be the trick, right? But we know it isn't, because these kids will act out, and then after they act out, they feel sorry about it, and they're frustrated that they can't control themselves, and they know they're not acting properly, and then they just repeat the cycle, because once again they're feeling this, and they don't have that inhibition in the brain to say, no, I should not say that to my teacher, type thing, or act out. And I think the thing I noticed big time was going from the education into the clinical side of things. Is that we're asking teachers basically to treat a physical disorder.
Right.
And they're not healthcare professionals. And they're reliant on healthcare professionals to get these kids better. And there's been a big gap in what actually has been effective. And that's a huge issue, is that, well, are we going to rely more on teachers to get these conditions better? And we call them learning challenges. And we make all these compensations to help kids get through and to learn better. But once again, then the physical areas of the brain are not developing properly, and we're not addressing how to get those parts of the brain to fire up and be stimulated so that the brain's more efficient, and then the student can learn better.
Yeah, and the children's self-esteem tanks.
Oh,
it's like it just absolutely tanks, because they keep trying and they keep failing. And so they're not taking home their reward or paycheck of a good report card, or good social interactions, or respect within the classroom, or self-control. Like when you lose self-control, that's one of the most horrible things for people to experience, that internal locus of control, and just knowing within yourself that you've got yourself handled, your own, your emotions in check. So it is important for people to sort of get the distinction between that. If you've got a neurological thing going on, that people will say, oh, just have more willpower about it. Like you can get somebody to pay $500,000 and sign a contract and ask them to follow through on something, and they will fail and lose their money and their house and because the problem isn't a willpower problem, and it's not the amount of the check that a person can write. It's because they've got a neurological problem going on, and it doesn't matter how much you try to talk to that brain, it's not cooperating. So first of all, I would just like everyone to let themselves off the hook a little bit, about going, all right, well, it isn't just I'm a big failure. It's what's going on in my head, what's going on in my child's neurology, that maybe we could look at this a little bit different, like what's going on under the hood here. Yes. But you can't see. So the kid or the adults even can look completely normal. And then you go, wow, but they're struggling in lots of areas in their lives. So then you don't want to tell anybody because it's shameful. You don't want to tell people that your kids are having difficulty because it's shameful. So they end up trapped still in this non-success, low self-esteem. Then they continue not only to make the bad choices that are a problem because their brain's a problem, but because now they've also got this psychological problem about themselves, that they're flawed and they're a mess. So when it comes to measuring these things, Dave, how do you do that? How do you actually take a child and measure what's going on in their brain, in their neurology?
Traditionally, it's been through different psychological evaluations and testing that way. The way I go about it, and a lot of functional neurology practitioners and other alternative care is going to be looking at, once again, the different pathways in the human system. And so you're looking at a lot of motor functions, you're looking at eye movements. Eye movements are huge, actually, and we miss these all the time. And we think it's all about glasses and acuity, but actually how the eyes move is a big one. And there is a ton of pathways that have to deal with eye movements. And that one's just rich. And you can look at smooth eye movements, whether they break down. You can look at quick eye movements, saccades. So how quickly and accurately they jump from one target to the next or one word to the next. So there are pieces of equipment now where we can look at how a child reads from word to word, and we can see how it breaks down. So instead of being able to go word for word, we're seeing the eyes jump all over the page. And of course, you're not going to be able to read as efficiently. And that system's going to break down and cause fatigue. And when the child gets fatigued, of course, they're going to act out and be more irritable and everything else. And posture is a huge one as well. Once again, the way the brain develops is going to be first primitive reflexes, where basically you've got this stimulation and then you've got a motor output. So there's like the rooting reflex, you stroke the cheek and the baby should suckle. And you've got spinal reflexes as well. You've got reflexes with eye movements and a lot of postural reflexes. So these primitive reflexes develop first, and then you get movements, and that's going to be core movements, eye movements, and then that starts to build the brain up more and more. So when you see these breakdowns in movements, and you can look at children and just see how they're moving around and expressions on their face, and you're going to be able to tell kind of what mood they're in, and okay, maybe that child's got some issues there with movement. Does that match up with learning issues? And the majority of the time it does. So a parent's observations are huge, and a caregiver's observations are huge as well. If you're seeing a child that your gut instinct is telling you there's something not right in how this child is functioning and moving and acting, then yeah, you've already nailed down that there's something not going right in how the nervous system's controlling that child. And then, of course, the cognition, math, the reading, all of these, it's gravy. It's the last thing in the brain to develop. So we've got to look at once again, the systems that develop first and set the foundation of brain health before we dive into all these learning challenges and issues. And that becomes the way to get these children functioning better and enjoying things more and more.
Yeah, and I'm sure most parents or educators could get the idea of, if you had a child who came by you and they had their arm dangling in an odd angle at an odd manner, and they looked at it and went, that doesn't look right. I better take this little one in for an x-ray. And then you get a look at the bone and go, oh, okay, well, that's broken. Okay, that's broken. There's no amount of talking to that's going to fix it. It actually needs to be fixed. So I want to, I guess, invite people to think about it, because there's an idea that you can fix things with talk therapy. And I'm not saying that talk therapy doesn't have its place. I have a psychology background myself, so I do think that there's a place and a time for that. But there's also the idea that you are going to, maybe be able to go to talk therapy, or somebody with a brain injury is going to be able to give enough intelligence to an interviewer for them to be able to assess what's going on. So it's been a privilege to actually be involved in the Huntington's community, because we've been doing these assessments for a very long period of time. So you can say whatever you want about how you feel, but when the neurologist actually does the little tests and you're, snapping your fingers and counting back from 100 by 7 and you're, whatever else that you're failing at, they go, okay, well, here's what's really going on. Thank you for, the great gait assessment walk. That was fun. And also we can tell that there's some things that aren't right. And this is with children. It works very well with children.
It works extremely well. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's disarming, right? Because you're just saying, can you go do this thing? Can you go, let me look at your eyes, follow the end of a pen, whatever is the neurological exam that you're doing, but it's disarming. It's playful. Well, depending on who's administering this, but you don't feel bad, like you don't have to feel bad, and the child doesn't have to feel bad either. So it can be a very different experience than the endless kind of going to talk therapy, trying to figure out why you're, not able to figure things out unless you get medication. So that it's a way to actually look at yourself just as if you had a broken arm or a dislocated shoulder, so would you just expect that to kind of be okay on its own without some sort of, a look at it and just a readjustment? Because you're probably not going to install a new brain, but you are going to work on ways to improve the pathways. But the first thing I guess is identifying, right? It's like, what's going on here in this brain? And the tests that you do now are so much more sophisticated now, even than 30 years ago, even though they seem simple, it's the sophistication of which you can gather that information, do an assessment, and then contemplate a proper treatment path forward for that individual child.
Right. Yeah, and you don't want a complicated diagnosis or treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody.
Why not?
Yeah. Simple is better, but getting simple things fixed takes a lot of practice, like any learning wise. And it baffles my mind how people want something overly complex for a diagnosis or for an explanation when it comes to learning challenges or later in life when things start to break down as well. But the brain, to simplify it, you've got neurons firing from one neuron to the next and all these connections between them. So there's basically just two things you're looking at. You're looking at, well, three things: speed, accuracy, and timing. And speed and timing, I guess you can kind of think of as being similar, but let's go with speech. So if it's slow and recollection, it's slowed and it's not too accurate. And then the timing's completely off. Like a lot of speech issues, once again, how you control those fine detailed muscles to actually make speech. Okay, that's speed, timing, and accuracy of firing muscles to create sounds. And that's off. So if we're looking at speech issues, which quite commonly go along with other neurodevelopmental disorders, of course, is timing, coordination of muscles. And well, those tiny little muscles that control speech aren't too far away from all those other muscles that keep us up on our feet. And when you look at how the brain develops, they're very similar, that midline musculature, in where it's controlled in these circuits in the brain. So you got speed, accuracy. So the fine detailed movements of eyes too is, once again, speed. Do they make it quickly to the target? Okay. When you flash something, are they able to shift their eyes quickly and look at it? Or is it slowed down? Okay. And the accuracy, if they're not able to come to the target, then they've got to redirect. And once again, that becomes a lot more energy for the brain to do. And you look at how many times per minute we're making these movements. And any little breakdown, inefficiencies, is going to cause that system to have to work more, and it's going to be more noisy for how the brain processes things. And we commonly go back to gait and movements. Well, the other is, let's look at handwriting, drawings, and that fine controlled detailed movement, art. And what we're also starting to see is that the detailed and the control of writing is starting to decline as well. And that's part
en masse, though.
This thing.
En masse in the general public, people's handwriting is not a good assessment of much of anything, because most people don't know how to handwrite much of anything. So it's a very interesting problem that we're creating for ourselves.
To practice that is starting to take away from, once again, that higher cognition, because we're not using our fine detailed, very intense and geographically area of the brain is huge for hand movements as well. And that's when we get to the neurodegenerative disorders, where we do that little, okay, make an L with your finger and tap. So we're looking at accuracy and speed of movements. But hands have a huge area of the brain that's there to control it and to move it. And if you see breakdowns there, it's not good news. And well, we can go through all of these little tests, but that's going to tell about different parts of the brain. And then we can match that up with the stimulation, exercise, modality to get that person better and functioning at a higher level. And yeah, simple things. One of the great tools out there is called the interactive metronome and it's got a whole bunch of research just on clapping to a beat. And you're looking at, okay, hyperanticipatory tendencies. Do they clap before the beat hits? And well, that's a brain that's firing too quickly, right? And inefficiently. But treatment-wise, getting those timing circuits, because once again, neurons pulse at different beats and rhythms. Think about those neurons that control your heart. So your pacemaker cells are neurons that tell your heart to beat at a certain rhythm. And if that rhythm is off, then we get all sorts of cardiac issues. Okay? But same with the timing centers in our brain, is that if that timing and rhythm is off, then we're going to get all sorts of neurologic issues or learning and behavioral issues as well, because that's a system that's just not working well. And if you use the music analogy, you're playing a different beat and it's just not in rhythm or sync with what's going on. And that orchestra in the brain just isn't functioning together. And then you get noise instead of music.
Right, and this is why people go, why is music so important to teach our young children?
Yeah.
Yes, number one, I think on YouTube searched is children's nursery rhymes and children's songs. So what that means is that people are at least trying to get their kids in front of some music. So I had no idea what a huge impact that had till you were talking about it. And I thought, well, I play guitar and I've played music for as long as I can remember. I've sang and had a really good music teacher in elementary school. So started doing the metronome work really early. But I can remember as a really young, probably like grade 2, noticing when people in my class wouldn't actually sing along with the teacher. And we had a great music teacher, so she was on time, right? The timing was good, but you could notice that people improved also, right? So it's like they didn't throw in the towel and she didn't say, oh, go sit down, Patrick. You're never going to get this. It was just like he would, whoever was having difficulty would get a bell or get a little maraca thing or a tambourine, and they would start to learn how to keep time with the metronome. And it was brilliant, but now it's like so simple and so much fun, right?
Oh,
really.
Yeah. Now you can put it in like little video games on the screen as well. And then the child has fun doing these activities that get their brain firing at the rate and speed it's supposed to be at. And it's amazing watching these kids have fun and also improve
Mhm.
and gain that confidence. And the other thing though is like you hear before you speak and sing. And two, uh, your right brain is more sensory and your left brain's more motor. So this is why you can't really say it's just one side of the brain or the other, because they're functioning together and back and forth. But you need to hear and feel before you can do. And some of these sensory processing issues, once again, are problems with more the right brain. So then we need to look at how we fire up the right brain and get that body sensation so that people can once again feel. And well, feel is kind of that root word of feelings.
Mhm.
And then we start to see, okay, well, it's that information coming into the brain that gives us that emotion too. And we gotta look at these issues. So quite commonly, especially in early development, is they learn by hearing and singing songs because it's that rhythmic action, and that turns into words. But you can't go right into just kind of speech and analytical stuff, and that's why those like young Einstein programs were horrible for kids' brains because we're trying to teach them something that's supposed to happen later down the road, and we neglected the fact that we need to have fun games and sensory enrichment for these brains to develop and process that information coming in before they can do academic stuff.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're highlighting this, because the other thing that I think people got a little bamboozled by was the brain games that are brain entrainment games, where you're, on there, say if something says the word red but is the color blue, you're supposed to say blue because you're supposed to identify the color, like these kinds of tests. And well, lumosity was one technology that, it's like people feel smarter because they get faster doing it, but it's not actually doing anything to rewire your brain. Or is it? Like, am I misinformed?
No, it's there to do one task. And the thing is, maybe you're already good at that task, or maybe it's not the root issue.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a symptom, once again, that you just didn't learn rhythm, how to hear it properly when developing. So now you need to go back and actually start to learn that timing and everything. And yeah, once again, it all starts with primitive reflexes, then kind of core axial musculature and eye movements, and then develops out into more cortical areas like fine detail controls with fingers. And it blossoms from there into academic stuff later in life. But you wouldn't build a house and ignore the foundation. And the foundation's the most important part. And we jump into these academic stuff way too soon, or we try to really train them when the root cause, once again, was these simple movement things and sensory processing issues that were never developed properly in the first place. And you need to go back and get these systems to fire first. And yeah, we like to talk about neurotransmitters in the brain too. So dopamine, serotonin, all of these. Once again, these are produced basically in brainstem regions and fire up into the higher cortical areas of the brain. Well, your brainstem, his first job is to process sensory information coming in through the body, and then it fires up those feel-good chemicals later. So this is too why we're starting to notice more and more issues with depression younger and younger now, is because once again, these parts of the brain were ignored when we started developing. And then later in life, we're getting all these symptoms, and we're not even looking at the root causes or the pathways that are causing these issues. And it's it's absolutely maddening
Mhm.
because yeah, we're all so biased that we need to learn all these academic stuff, but we're missing the boat on actually how the brain functions and how it's set up. And you need to get the hardware working better before you start putting software into the system.
Yeah.
That's the mission, and that we're on is to get these to be looked at more and more, and earlier and earlier, and build these healthy brains and get these kids functioning at the way they're supposed to, or we designed to work.
Yeah. So in early beginnings of things, one of the things I guess I'm blessed with grandchildren. And so I do, and I mean, obviously I had children that lived because I have grandchildren. So that's a tricky thing, right? Is that we sang all the time. So we sang in the car, we played patty cake when they were little, kissing the hands and feet, singing to the babies when they were in your belly. In my daughter and my daughter-in-law, when they were expecting their children, was singing. I sing all the time. I sing a lot. I have a guitar in my office here, but I sing a lot. What's that?
Why don't you play us something?
I should sing you a song. I could sing you a song. That would be okay. So yes, a favorite one, and is that I do qigong as well, which healing sounds is part of the modality of healing. So I just thought this all totally makes sense to me, the singing and the sound thing, because I don't know why, but I've done it from a very, very young age. But when my grandchildren are over, it's like as soon as I start clapping my hands or whatever, it's just like whoosh, they look over at the youngest one. Theodore is just 8 months old, and he can't take his eyes off me. It's just glued. And Zio, who's 2.5, it's the same thing. It's just like she stops whatever she's doing, she runs over, and she just stands there. So until you can get them to clap. And then they're clapping, and you're singing patty cake, baker's man. But a lot of people don't even know the simple nursery rhymes that we used to sing, because I think a lot of it's been just hijacked by the TV, so it's like put on whatever is on the TV instead of you actually singing or singing
we're shifting children's brains into the wrong, overloading them with, once again, more visual stuff and less tactile stuff as well. But later in life, people that hate music and dancing, what do you notice about them?
They're depressed. A lot of them are depressed, angry.
And they're awkward, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that time is off.
Right.
They feel awkward. They kind of move awkwardly. So once again, why don't we go back to what we've actually observed and matched up with the nervous system, is that a lot of people later in life are feeling awkward. And the solution is, once again, we got to fix that timing. And a great way is by music and dance and sport and all these activities that should be fun.
So go to music. Just go back to music for a bit, because again, one of the things is I'm a lyricist. So I pay attention to what the lyrics are of the song. And so along the way, I will go, well, you know what, that song I wouldn't sing to my children. And I certainly wouldn't play it to my children. And I don't even want to hear it myself, honestly. When I hear the words of a lot of songs, I just go, like, is that actually what I want to be telling myself? And so there's lots of people who don't pay attention at all to that. It's all about the beat. And the beat is the thing and the whatever. But then you can get yourself into trouble also by just following the beat of something. So part of the wisdom of music is understanding really how powerful it is, because it's very, very, very powerful. It's very primal. So it can activate things in a good way, but it can also take you over the top into things that maybe you're going, I don't know if that should have been where things went. This like ecstatic dancing. A lot of people do their, it's just like they'll get people to join in with what they're doing because they play, music that's, it puts people in a trance, in a way, in a trance-like state. So just understand, I guess, that music's really powerful and it's a good thing in terms of helping with this neural development. but also watching that it doesn't go on for hour after hour after hour, which when you've got an injured brain or a brain that's in trouble, it will want to take the pathway that feels the best for a long period of time too. So there's balance in all these things. Would you say that that's accurate, Dr. Dave, or is that a little too?
There you started going, you separated it, and you separated it into the beat timing of things, and then into the words. So the word centers are kind of more left brain, and then once again, the rhythm and timing stuff is more right brain. So you can be stimulating one system more than the other, and also developing more of a disconnect between, once again, processing that beat, rhythm, timing, more right brain, and the words, the actions, more left brain. So yeah, this goes into kind of that therapeutic approach now with music as well, is that, okay, well, what's the issue? Is it more left brain, words and actions, or is it more right brain? So if it's a speech issue, then we start to notice, okay, they're not saying their words right. Maybe just going through and saying more and more words isn't the approach. Maybe it's first the timing, so that develops more, and we're fixing it. So in that case, the music therapies you'd want to do wouldn't have too many words with them. It would be that beat timing, and you'd want to do it at the appropriate frequency, how often you do it, to actually make a change to that part of the brain without overloading it. So in like autism is a good example, is they're very visual dominant, and then of course, quite commonly, they don't say words, and it's that rhythm and timing, but they can have all sorts of sound sensitivities. So you can overload these children's brains too very easily with doing it too much, or at a intensity that's once again too much for their brain to handle at that point in time. So you just need to dull it down, back it up a little bit, but you still need to be using that timing and rhythm, beats, everything else, to get that part of the brain to start to fire up and be able to handle that sensory information and build those connections that are stable versus unstable and firing way too much. And all of these sensory modalities are very, very powerful in these children's brains. And there's so many different, once again, treatments out there that have been used by several different practitioners. And we know it helps developing these brains. And we need to get more attention into these arenas versus just trying to mask the symptoms so that a child can sit there in a desk. And it's completely the wrong approaches to things at this point in time. And there once again is so much coming out, and then our tendency is to always try this, try that, instead of looking at the big picture and analyzing an individual child's brain before we go with the actual treatment approaches. Because getting it targeted and personalized is the way you fix a brain. It's not by these large protocols that they work generally and help a lot of people out, but it can be more targeted and specific for one child. Make that magic happen for them.
Yeah, and for you. So once your child is feeling great, then it's magic for you. We've only got a couple minutes left, Dave, but I would like it can you speak to, because we've talked about some neural developmental conditions. We've talked about ADHD, a little bit about autism, some soft skill sorts of things that people could deal with. What about prevention of these things? Can you speak to what could prevent a neurodevelopmental problem from occurring in the first place?
Yeah, the health of the mother especially is going to be key. And especially as these neurons start to multiply and divide and create this beautiful baby, you've got to look at, well, what would diminish the ability of cells to have this process? And inflammation is a huge one. So the health of the mother is key. Decreasing the level of stress is huge as well. And then two, the timing and health of the mother's brain as well most likely has an effect all the way through that developmental period before the baby's born as well. And then it definitely does when the baby's looking at the parents and starting to develop those connections, is they're reading and picking up your timing inefficiencies as well as your strengths. So the health of the parents is key all the way through. And we need to really support young mothers and expecting mothers, and even before that, just people at that age group that are going to have babies. Help develop them the systems beforehand,
right,
for these young girls, ladies, and those the babies.
And so this might be an unfair question with 30 seconds left, but is there any studies out on the use of marijuana during pregnancy that affects the child? And if you don't have enough time to answer that, maybe we'll uptake it on the next episode. But
with any, the key during pregnancy is always to take away anything that's potentially going to have an effect on that developing brain. And that goes with all these prescription, non-prescription drugs, alcohol, and then of course bad foods and everything along that line that's going to really cause damage to a child, even if it may or may not. Then who wants to take that gamble and risk?
Right. Good point. Good point. Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Dr. David Hardy, for your expertise and your wisdom and your genuine care for people, because you can just tell it every time we talk that it's like what you want is healthy people, right? So that's a win for everybody. I think when we're all looking at what are the ways that we can be healthy at the beginning, and then if we need interventions or help and support, how do we reach out to get that? You can find out more about Dr. David Hardy by reaching out to the Red Deer Sports Center, the Collegiate Sports Center, or you can obviously email us. You can find more episodes on masteryourlife.ca. Everyone, we're done for this week. Thank you so much, Dr. Dave.
Thank you.
Everyone, love yourselves, love each other, mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leaha Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.